Well, hello, everybody. This is Tim Green with Rattle Magazine. Welcome to Rattlecast number 165. So glad you could join me. Today's guest, Cindy Veach, will be here in just a little bit. But before we begin, I should say that Rattle is a publication of the Rattle Foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit working to promote the practice of poetry. We've been in continuous publication since 1995 and are unaffiliated with any other organization. So if you enjoy what we do, please do click the like button and share, and make sure you're subscribed. Anything you can do to help spread poetry around the internet would be much appreciated. You might notice we're filming from our new office, which is brighter and hopefully lighter. The last office I did not make with the plan of having a web live stream going on, so the walls were dark brown, and it felt like broadcasting from a cave. Now we have a white room, which is probably a little bit better for those watching anyway. But good to see everybody today. As always, we're going to start with our Poets Respond poet, and we have Sunday's poet here on the line. Matt Honer is here. Hey, Matt, how you doing? Oh, Matt, I'm not getting any audio. I think you're on mute. Yeah, there you go.
I'm good. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so you had a wonderful poem, Drone God, just so moving, and just one of those poems that sticks with you after you read it. Do you want to explain a little bit what inspired the poem? And I don't know if people, there's a warning under it, the link to watch it, because the video is very disturbing, and the sort of the simplicity of it, or the way that it just plays out there silently on the video. But tell us what inspired the poem.
So I've been paying attention to what's going on in Ukraine, and I've probably watched a lot more video about or of what's happening there than any healthy person should. Definitely not anywhere as bad as what's actually happening to the folks. And I think that's where the poem kind of generated. It's the idea that we can watch these moments of pure violence and horror over here in our safe little offices with our bookshelves behind us and our little glass of fresh, clean water next to us. And these things are happening not just in Ukraine. There are almost nightly or daily gun deaths here in Baltimore that we'll see on the news, and we can change the channel, hit mute, and feel like it doesn't affect us. And so I wanted to kind of capture that sense of feeling affected, yet outside everything is normal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's so striking, having these images played before us, and then we have to go about our regular lives and live as if somewhere in the world this kind of thing isn't happening. And to describe it for people who haven't watched, it's described a little bit in the poem, but it's drone footage from over the top of two Russian soldiers in a trench, sort of lying there as it's described in the poem. And then it drops a small bomb on, and you watch the whole thing, and you watch the aftermath as well in this little video that was tweeted out by a journalist there. And so that was the inspiration for this poem. Let's hear it. Why don't you read it, Matt?
Drone God. The video is silent. The bomb, smaller than a trenching tool. It falls to the ambient sounds of your home, the neighbor's children playing outside in the street, autumn birds calling to each other in the trees. The bomb, adorned in blue and gold stripes, shrinks towards two men in a foxhole, curled close like twins in a womb, colored in the drab palette of battle, the hue and shade of the soil that will consume their bodies. You are a god, or what's replaced him, above it, watching the bomb descend like a terrible word from your mouth, like spittle. The bomb blasts inches from the men's knees. Debris kicks up towards your face, hovering over the scene. Dust shakes loose in a cloud from the ground surrounding them. As the smoke clears, one man drags himself out by an arm, legs kicking, faltering. The other lurches and rises, fumbling in concussed stupor. Your last glimpse of the men is the moment the end of the first man's left arm blossoms bright red where his hand used to be. Outside your window, children laugh and squeal on scooters, on skateboards, on bicycles. Steam creaks in the warming radiators. A breeze shakes leaves loose from the trees, showering the children in confetti of gold, umber, auburn, crimson, under a cloudless sky.
Yeah, and that was Matt Honor, of course, reading Drone God, Sunday's poem from Rattle.com. Thanks so much, Matt, for sharing that poem. Really powerful stuff, and just puts a lot of things into perspective, reading it and sharing it. So thanks so much for sharing that and joining us tonight.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, take care. So now we're going to take a little gander. I always imagine part of the show would be sharing some poems like a disc jockey would or something. And so I wanted to share another poem before we go to our main guest tonight. And the poem I'm going to do is I came up with a random button after a couple clicks. And this is a fun one, especially for all you submitters out there. This is Richard Prinz with Bless Me Editor. So let's enjoy this poem, and then we'll go to a quick break, and then we'll talk to our main guest tonight. But here.
Bless me, editor, for I have sinned. It has been 6 months since my last submission. During that time, I got liquored up on a few hundred occasions, often to forget my responsibilities, and sometimes in pursuit of carnal relations. I also accepted key bumps in a few divey bathrooms, even though I never liked that crap, and snorted lines of ecstasy to mark certain milestones in a hedonistic manner. I only went to church once, editor, unless you count meetings to resist our president that happened to take place inside of a church, where I gained more sustenance than I ever do noshing on the body of Christ. Editor, I do not recall taking your name in vain, though I didn't thank you for your consideration last time you rejected me. But I sure cursed my Lord and Savior every chance I got, every time I missed a bus, stubbed my toes, spilt a drink, or checked my bank statement near the end of the month. Moreover, I participate in the capitalist economy every day by making purchases of questionable practicality, by making payments on loans and accepting payments of rent, by owning property and thereby fomenting the oppression of mankind. And I did not give money to everyone who asked me, even though I've read the Bible and know it's what Jesus would do, no matter if they were rude, flaky, or an ex-girlfriend. Editor, did Jesus have ex-girlfriends? And several times I became disconsolate and grumpy when my partner did not want to have relations with me. And several times I became anxious she might have relations with someone who is not me, even though I had relations with people who are not her, and felt sad about it, and complained about that sadness to my partner who loves me as only a goddess could and deserves neither my mistrust nor my hypocrisy. Therefore I never lied to her, editor, but I lied in small ways to almost everyone else, and never ceased considering myself an exceptionally honest person. Editor, I picked my nose and ate the boogers no matter how many bystanders I disgusted. I littered and defiled our planet, tossed dead batteries in my household trash, and I did not recycle everything I could recycle. Editor, I grew too easily frustrated with my daughter's mother, even though she is a commendable mother, and when I visited their home I did not resist patriarchal exigencies, or change an equitable amount of diapers, or cook or do much cleaning, and though I thanked the Lord profusely for my baby's health and beauty, and though my prolonged absences from her life are surely penance for sins long past, I still don't comprehend how joy and pain can feed each other so lavishly. It's dark in here, editor. I can't see you and didn't bother learning your name. Are all my sins written in my face? Do you know how much I'm not telling you because it would be too lurid to print? Have you already stopped reading? I made derogatory comments about puppies. Editor, I just don't like them. I referred to police officers as pigs while marching for Black Lives. Although I believe dehumanizing language is amoral and violent, I did not believe it was my place to amend a mass chant. I was probably blocking traffic at the time, which is a violation, not a sin, but the pigs didn't arrest me for it, so it falls on you to punish me, editor. For I have lived as a cis and mostly straight white male, mindlessly accumulating privilege and dressing in a manner that could be described is culturally appropriative, and I submit to you that I allowed too many white people to smile at me in the days following the 2016 presidential election. Though I pined for their swift and just obliteration from the earth, which is violent and sinful, I did not include that wish for the white race's annihilation in my prayers, which is surely just as sinful. I mean, don't you agree God should just fucking smite us already? And I harbored baleful thoughts towards anyone who obstructed me on the subway or sidewalk, even though I habitually obstructed others on the subway and sidewalk. And I harbored lustful thoughts for a mushroom burrito last week and did not stop myself from committing gluttony. And I harbored jealous thoughts whenever someone I knew was being published or celebrated more than me. But nevertheless, I cowered from risk in my own writing and spent many afternoons throwing back mojitos at the beach with my partner basking in her splendor when I should have been clamping my ass to my ratty swivel chair and digging the real poems out of my chest. So here they are, my detestable sins against our human enterprise, for which I ask your absolution, editor, who art good and deserving of my love. With my whole depraved heart, I regret offending thee.
And that was Richard Prince once again. I don't know if it's just me, but that poem always cracks me up. Maybe it's because he's talking to editors. But I thought that was hilarious. Hope you guys enjoyed it too. That was Richard Prince with Bless Me, editor from Rattle number 58. Now we're going to take a quick break and get back to our main guest, Cindy Veach. So sit tight, and we'll be right back with Cindy Veach. And we're back. Thanks so much for your patience. Like I said, today's guest is Cindy Veach. Cindy is the author of Her Kind from CavanKerry Press, a finalist for the Eric Hoffer Montaigne Medal, Gloved Against Blood from CavanKerry Press as well, named a Paterson Poetry Prize finalist and the Massachusetts Center for the Book Must Read, and the chapbook Innocence, Nixes Mate Press. Her poems have appeared in the Academy of American Poets Poem a Day series, AGNI, Chicago Review, Prairie Schooner, and elsewhere. Her poem, This Patch Where the Light Cannot Reach, was selected by Mary Ruefle for the Philip Booth Poetry Prize, and her sonnet crown, Which Kitsch, was selected by Marilyn Nelson for the Samuel Washington Allen Prize. Cindy received an MFA from the University of Oregon, where she was a graduate teaching fellow and an assistant poetry editor for Northwest Review, and now she's co-poetry editor of Mom Egg Review. So we'll talk about that too. But here she is, Cindy Veach. Hey, Cindy, how are you doing?
Great. How are you?
Yeah, great. It was great to read this book today. I love books with themes that are, and this is such a strong and really powerful theme to go with it. Do you want to start out by reading a poem?
Sure. Yes, I'm going to read a poem on page 20.
Okay.
And this is somewhat of a found poem from an article. Reasons you might have been accused of being a witch in 1692. You were a woman, you are middle-aged, you have an extra nipple, mole, freckle, or basically any other mark on your body. You stumble over your words. You have an extra nipple, mole, freckle. When asked to say a prayer, you stumble over the words. You are married but don't have children. When asked to say a prayer, you are the envy of other people. You are married but don't have enough children. You associate with someone suspected of witchcraft. You are the envy of other people. You are perceived as bitchy. You associate with someone suspected of witchcraft. You are milk spoiled. You are perceived as bitchy. You are of low status. You're milk spoiled, or anything vaguely negative that happened to or around you. You are of low status. You have any mark on your body. You're milk spoiled. You are a woman. You are middle-aged.
Those reasons you might have been accused of being a witch in 1692. Again, from Her Kind, a great poem to start out with. So, Cindy, the fascinating thing is that you you lived in Salem for a long time, for decades, right, before writing this book. And so can you describe how this book came to be? Because the book deals with witches throughout history, or people being called witches, and kind of reclaims that as well. So what was it that made you want to write about this, and how did the process of the book shape your view of the Salem witch trials, which is something you've been so familiar with living there for so long?
Yeah, so great question. I lived not in Salem, but in the Salem area, just a few miles away for 30 years. And, all the hoopla around Halloween, and pretty much all year round in Salem, I never really thought about the trials until one day when this was in 2016, cutting through an alley, and I came upon the Salem Witch Trials Memorial, where I was so moved by what I saw. There's a bench for each of the 20 victims, and a threshold that contains their words carved in the threshold. And it just, I don't know, it was just like this epiphany that these were human beings, innocent people that were murdered. And yet the town really makes its livelihood on the witch kitsch aspect of the Salem witch trial. So I started with wanting to write a poem about each of the 20 victims. And that became the chapbook, Innocence. But as I was working on that, I also was going through a divorce after a very long marriage, and Donald Trump was elected president. And all these things sort of converged, and I realized that this was becoming a book. It was more than a chapbook, and it needed to include these other elements. So that's kind of where it started.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and do you want to read another poem to get more of a sense of what we're dealing with here? Yeah.
So yes, the next poem I'll read is on page 3. It's called I Witch. This is a poem that actually starts the book, and it does bring in the divorce theme. And one thing I should mention is many of the poems have italicized text, which are actually words or phrases from the actual testimonies of the individuals that were executed. It's called I Witch. So what if I woke up changed? It's not like I'm a wild hog or some evil thing, not a real hog, that follows you home, jumps into the window, a monkey with cock's feet with claws. Don't believe what my accuser says, or believe it. The fact is, my divorce attorney's building sits on the site of the prison where they kept the accused in chains in 1692. I came there with a silk scarf worn loosely at the neck, borders looped with colored thread. He came with daisies, dark chocolate, and proclaimed, "My wife came towards me and found fault with me." Downstairs in the dungeon, they chained us to the walls to keep our spirits from escaping in the likeness of a bird.
And that was I Witch, again from Her Kind by Cindy Veach, today's guest on the Rattlecast. So Cindy, how did you become a poet? Is that something that you always wanted to be? Is it something that you came to later in life? Is there something that like triggered that and made you want to become a poet?
I started writing poetry when I was about 13. Mm-hmm. Maybe dealing with adolescence, I don't know. I just started to write poems then. And then when I was in college, I took a lot of creative writing courses and a poetry course. And that's pretty much what, I decided, or whatever, I was going to, want to be a poet. Mm-hmm. But then I ended up doing a MFA at the University of Oregon about 5 years after college. But then what happens to a lot of women, I married, I had 2 children, I had a full-time corporate job, and poetry took a back burner for like 20 years. Mm-hmm. So the first book I published was 2017. Mm-hmm. I was 63 years old. Uh-huh. So
Well, congratulations. I mean, a lot of people would love to hear that, because there's a sense that like it's too late to start sometimes with the, like an emphasis on younger poets and that kind of thing that comes around in the poetry community. So a lot of people are worried that like that age is too late to start, but obviously not. Have you had any difficulties with that in that respect, that you feel like it's more difficult starting out later, or do you think it just was easier maybe?
Well, I think, as you said, there's just a lot of emphasis on the younger poets, and that feeling that, yeah, I'm never going to be in that category. And but for me, it was just a passion, and it was something that I put aside. And then once my kids were grown, I mean, I never stopped writing, but I actually didn't send out, I didn't publish for 18 years, a single poem. I just was not a good multitasker, had a very busy corporate job. And I never stopped thinking about it, but it wasn't until the kids were, off in college that I was able to really put my attention toward it again. So, I mean, for me, it feels good, and no matter what your age, I say go for it,
Yeah, for sure. I'm trying to understand the timeline. Did the chapbook come first? Was that the first thing that you published? The Innocence?
Actually, Gloved Against Blood was the first book. So that was 2017. And then Innocence wasn't published. I think it was 2020. So I kind of wrote all those poems, and then I started on Her Kind, and that got published actually later.
Yeah. So what was your first book? Was there a theme or a topic for that?
Yeah, there is a theme. It's themed around the boot cotton mills in Lowell, Massachusetts, where my great grandmother was a mill girl. Yeah. So again, it was sort of a project book. It was sort of the my mother's side of the family and that whole factory experience.
Yeah. So what brought you to the Salem area? Did you grow up there, or?
No, I actually came to New England after my MFA program for a job at a company, and I ended up staying there for 30 years.
Yeah. Well, very cool that you could turn that experience into this book, because it's really a great book.
Thank you.
Yeah. Would you like to read another poem?
Sure. So the poem I'm going to read is on page 6. It's titled Spectral Evidence. This was a type of testimony in which a witness could claim that the accused person had appeared to them, in a dream or as an apparition and done something to them. So the actual person didn't have to have been present in order to be accused, and that was allowed in the courts. Spectral evidence. Because she said she saw, and therefore these pinholes in her skin, on one arm to be exact. Look how they crisscross, make a doily of the flesh. And because she said she saw you, not you, take a small pin from your pocket, a straight pin with a flat head. And because she said it was, therefore you, therefore not a dream, puncturing each pore, you in the flesh, not flesh, with a common pin.
And that was Spectral Evidence from Her Kind. So in the course of writing this book, what did you learn about the Salem witch trials? Because and what is do you have an opinion about what triggered it? Was it just like a mass hypnosis type thing, or I read a book once that had the premise, and it was backed up by evidence but no way to prove it, that there was I think a kind of bread mold, because there was like a tough like harvest, and then there was a really wet year, and then they were like digging to the bottom of their resources, and then there being this mold on the grain that was a hallucinogen, and so people were actually having like psychotic episodes and imagining seeing things that triggered it, and then it sort of spiraled from there. Do you have any sort of sense of of the actual history of? I mean, I think that's a fringe view, but is there any kind of sense you have of like what actually happened and what caused it?
There are a lot of theories, including the one that you talk about, and I don't know how fringe that is really, but
well, at the time it was like 20 years ago I read that book.
Yeah,
so.
They're still talking about it. I mean, what I lean toward is that it was sort of political and religious, and based on land. A lot of it was based on land. Landowners and wanting more land, and
so people were accusing people to try to get their land. Like if someone was a witch, they'd have to give up their land, and
there was just a lot of politics involved, and also Puritan. The Puritans were anyone that was not living within the Puritan values was at risk, especially in the beginning. You know,
Mm-hmm.
things like if you didn't have enough children, or if you'd lost a lot of children because they had passed away from illness, you would be suspect. So yeah, I don't think there's any clear answer on exactly what it was, and there are a lot of various theories. But
yeah, I mean the mass psychosis. There's such an interesting history with that, with like the laughing sickness. Did you research any of the other similar episodes like that? Like one, the laughing sickness one is, I think, somewhere in Africa. There's a tribe in Africa, and it was after there'd been kind of a war and a famine, like a very stressful time, and someone started, a little girl started laughing like uncontrollably and couldn't stop, and it spread as if it was a virus, but it was just a psychological contagion where like the person would think they contracted this laughing virus. It was like the tension that had built up over years. Have you researched any of that going into that? Because that's like a fascinating aspect of what happened in Salem. Just the way that
yeah,
mental, it's like a mental virus that spreads between people.
it is. I mean, there's one poem, I was going to read it, but I maybe I'll read it, which was about something called umancy, which is when you drop an egg in water, and when you look at how the albumin forms, and you see things in it. And there's a theory that two of the women, the girls that were the accusers, had done this, and they saw something and they went hysterical. And so again, like you're saying, this laughing sickness, maybe it was similar to that.
Yeah. Do you want to read that poem?
Sure. It's on page 29.
Okay.
Umancy triggers witch hunt. Because albumin in water shapeshifts, becomes bells, fingers, spires, becomes omen, a future husband, his occupation, but also unexpectedly, a specter in the likeness of a coffin, a sign of diabolical molestation. Elizabeth and Abigail fell into fits, barking like dogs, complaining. Invisible spirits were pinching them. Therefore the afflicted, therefore the accused.
And that was umancy triggers.
That's another theory.
Yeah. It's just so fascinating that, it's such a big event, like at least in the cultural imagination, can have like no known cause. It just sort of erupts spontaneously out of like our own, the way people are messed up. I mean, basically.
Exactly. I mean, when you think about what's happening now in politics with, the QAnon and all these theories about, is it any different? There is this fringe sort of extremism, and where did that start? Where is it going?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and it seems like the way that religions develop too, and out of that kind of like a cultish belief in some thing that gathers momentum and snowballs and sucks more people up.
Scary.
So, yeah, it really is. I mean, just the way that human beings are so much more than just what we think of consciously. Like so much more is going on, like underneath the surface and driving us that we don't even understand. And that's one of the things that the Salem witch trials brings out, I think.
Right, and also the how that affects the community and sort of the collective.
Yeah, for sure. So how much like what kind of research did you do? Was the museum that you mentioned earlier really helpful in digging through records like that, I imagine?
Well, yeah, I mean, the University of Virginia has transcribed and digitized all of the transcripts, and so they're available online to the public. So that was really my main resource. And then books, Salem Possessed was one of the books I've got. There were like 3 books that I pretty much used, and then stuff online. But really, those transcripts were, I mean, they're their words. It's incredible.
Yeah. And I imagine you put yourself like in their shoes a lot of the time, right? Especially reading their transcripts that are their actual words. Is that something like a connection that you felt?
Yeah, I mean, like for each poem that I wrote about a victim, it took me a long time to find my door into that individual. So reading through the transcripts until I found something that, I really responded to in a way where I could write a poem. And that might take, days, weeks, months to find that little opening.
Yeah. So how long did the book take to put together with all that research and then the difficulty finding doors? Was it a while?
Yeah. I mean, I probably worked on it for 2.5 years. Yeah.
Well, let's hear another one.
All right, so I thought the next couple of poems I'll read are, I call them the victim poems. So these are about some of the individuals that were executed. This one is on page 7, Elizabeth Howe of Sorrows. Her husband was blind, so she had to work the farm. Elizabeth Howe of Sorrows. I had to be my husband's eyes, the light that could not reach them, leading him about by the hand, tilling the land my father gave me, running the household. And for this, they would not let me come into the church of Ipswich. And for this, they said I bewitched horses, cows, sows, and was the cause of sorrows that killed the Pearlies, little Hannah. No, never in all my life. I saw I had to be the husband, eyes, mouth, muscle, and took the lead and hanged for it. So in that case, she was doing something that women were not supposed to do then. And also they were not supposed to be landowners. So.
Yeah. And so that's the kind of thing that you mentioned, where it was about the land and about, yeah. And just the general, of course, misogyny, which Dick Westheimer points out here, that fuels such craziness, as Dick said here. And so what about that aspect of it? Relating it through, the present day, which is just, we're a culture full of misogyny still, and every culture in the world is. How did you realize that was, because you weave, the present day through the book so well. How did you realize that there was a thread that you could continue with poems set in the contemporary day?
Well, I think what triggered it for me was, going through my own divorce. So I am the person who filed for divorce. I felt a lot of judgment associated with that. And I felt misunderstood. So in a way I was, feeling like maybe some of these female victims might have felt during the witch trials. And then, what was going on in politics and Trump, and, it just all fell together for me that those things had to be in the book. And I actually decided to only include the female victims in the book because the book became very feminist as I worked on it. And so certain things became clear to me that needed to be in it and needed to be left out of it.
Yeah. Let's hear another one.
All right. This one is on page 55. Okay. Trump has called the investigation a witch hunt 84 times. Martha Carrier, hanged 1692. They said she brought smallpox to Andover. They said she killed her father and brother, making her a queen in hell, aka landowner. Neighbors testified it was none other than Goody Carrier who haunted them at night. They said she bit Sue Sheldon, threatening to cut her throat because she wanted her to sign the book. She stuck a pin in dumb Ann Putnam, killed Samuel Preston's cow for being very lusty. And there was that devil man whispering in her ear. Somehow she caused the death of Alan Toothacre's cat. For these complaints, though each one was a lie, she was condemned by the grace of God to die.
Yeah, and that was Trump has called the investigation a witch hunt 84 times, which is the fascinating way that you weave an example of how you weave through contemporary events just by changing the title to that. Adds a whole other extra layer to the poem, which is a fascinating way to write. And the names that you come through make me wonder, is there a certain person in historical time that you sort of related to the most or found the most interesting and sort of obsessed over? Or did you feel like it was a whole pattern of characters that were worth exploring?
I guess I can't say that I felt in particularly close to any one of the individual female victims. They were all so different in terms of what they were accused of. And as the trials progressed, I mean, in the initial victims tended to be women that had lived outside the Puritan norms, but as they progressed, they became more and more women that had been accepted in the society. And so every one of them broke my heart. I mean, they were executed for things that, You know, how can you be called a witch because you lost too many children or because your husband died? You know, it's just so cruel.
Yeah, just cruelty in a response to tragedy is like magnifies it.
It's awful.
Yeah.
And then with, you know, when Trump was referring to, you know, the Mueller report as, you know, that's a witch hunt, you know, it's just, again, that irony, similar to the witch Kitsch of Salem. It's like ignoring and looking past what really happened. You know, that's what's scary. I mean, these people were humans, victims, executed, murdered. You know, think if that were happening today in Salem, you know, and yet, you know, right now, Salem is, you know, it's a madhouse. Thousands of people. You can't even get near the town during the whole month of October.
Yeah, so the whole month of October, it just becomes like one of the biggest tourist places in the Northeast.
It's nuts.
Yeah.
You don't go there if you live in the area. You do not go to Salem in October. You just...
Yeah, well, it's like here when it snows. But yeah, so what in the course of your research, is there something you found that was the most surprising? Like you had an expectation of something having happened a certain way, and then you realized that your thought about what had happened was completely wrong. Were there any reversals like that?
Well, I guess what I found, which, you know, I was so focused on the victims, to the 20 victims, right? 14 women, 6 men. And what I learned was there were so many more imprisoned, hundreds of individuals that were imprisoned and kept in prison for, some of them even beyond the trials, a year, 2 years. And that surprised me. I didn't even realize, you know, there's so much focus on the people that were executed. And, you know, they were charged for their prison time in prison. The families went broke paying for their jail cells.
Oh, wow. So they wouldn't like die of starvation or something?
Some of them did die in prison, but no, they were there, and they were like, if you could pay more money and have a slightly bigger cell. I mean, and the tide, the water would rise and sometimes be actually in that building I spoke about where I had my divorce attorney, that literally was where the prison was.
Wow.
That site. And apparently the water sometimes would run through the basement where some of the cells were.
Wow.
So those are some of the things I learned that I had no idea, you know. And then the other surprising thing, I think the last victim was just, you know, forgiven by the state of Massachusetts recently.
Oh, wow.
I mean, it took 300 years.
Yeah, 2001 you mentioned.
I mean, it's crazy, you know. So that was a surprise too.
Yeah. So you already answered this question, but Jayanthi Rangan wanted to know if there were male victims too. And you mentioned there were 6. Were they charged with being witches as well, or were they like aiding and abetting? Could you be a witch and be a male? That's something I've never.
Yeah, I mean, they were charged as witches. Yes. I think sometimes they call them wizards, but they were called witches. And interestingly, you know, if you confess to being a witch, you wouldn't be executed. So the people that confessed were forgiven, and those that refused, because they really were not witches, they refused to say they were. And there was one of the male victims, he initially confessed and he was going to be exonerated, but he couldn't live with himself for that lie. So he then said, no, I'm not a witch, and he was killed. So
wow. So the people in jail were the people who refused. What happened if they confessed? Were there a punishment at all, or were they just like, oh, okay, you're a witch, we'll let you go? There must have been some kind of like, don't be a witch anymore, you know?
Yeah, I don't know. They never got to trial for those other folks and just left them in jail. But
yeah, wow, it's just hard to like how much that would take. You know, how much pride in your own, you know, sense of honor and the truth it would take to for those people who refused and then you know died for it brutally too. I mean, they were terrible deaths.
They were hung, and they were like, you know, they do like 8 in one day. You know, they just, you know, cart them up to the, you know, gallows hill and do it. Yeah.
So what, I never understood what the makeup of the town was. How many, like what percentage of the population was like devout Puritan? And, you say it started on the fringes and got more and more close to the actual Puritan church. Was it a community of all people that were supposedly Puritans?
Yeah, I think it was all Puritan then. And the town, I'm not by any means an expert on this, but what's Salem now, there was Salem town and Salem village, and one became eventually the town of Danvers. So the town was changing, its borders were changing, and that is what brought in some kind of land concerns.
Yeah.
But it was, I think back in that day, everyone was Puritan. The Puritans had settled in New England.
Yeah, so it was the ones that pretended to be but weren't strongly devout enough at first, maybe.
Or they just did something that, like if a woman wore something that was very colorful, like one of my poems, The Colorful Scarf, that was not allowed if you were a Puritan. So just something like that would cause alarm, even if that person was Puritan and was devout.
Yeah. Well, if anybody has any questions for Cindy about this or any other questions, just leave them in the chat windows on Facebook or YouTube, and I'll pass them along. But in the meantime, let's hear another poem.
All right. So this one is page 45. I filed for divorce and sundry other acts of witchcraft. Therefore, I am the earthquake and its tectonic plate, a rock chucked into a languid lake. I am the headache that keeps you awake, an unexpected snake at the end of the rake, a rock tossed into a placid lake. I am the shake that rattles the gate and the faux pas that deflates the cake, a rock dropped into a flat lake. I am a plague outbreak, the thirst you can't slake, a rock flung into a tranquil lake, and the rip in something opaque. I am the dam stake in the landscape, the firebreak that forsakes, a rock cast into a still lake, the mean old drake, the keepsake that's fake, a rock hurled into a serene lake, the cause of your toothache and the failed windbreak, every mistake, a rock pitched into a quiet lake. I am the one to hate, no one's namesake, the earthquake and its tectonic plate.
And that was I filed for divorce and sundry other acts of witchcraft, therefore, from her kind. So the poems in the book lean toward formal. There are a lot of there's actual sonnets. There's 14-line poems. There are poems that rhyme throughout like that. Have you always been drawn to formal poetry, and if so, why?
Actually, have not always been drawn to formal poetry. I think in my first book there were a couple of sonnets and maybe a ghazal. For this book, I found in particular on the poems about the victims, the sonnet form really helped me contain what I needed to write about. It's hard to explain, but there was a lot of material and a lot of it was very emotionally charged, and I just felt like I needed to contain it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And so, ended up doing several sonnets as part of this book, but it hasn't been something that I'm, necessarily good at or drawn to.
Well, I mean, there's more of it in this book than the past, and I don't know. They're my favorite poems are always formal poems, or they tend to be. So I love those. And you also have the style where we've seen several, like Spectral Evidence, where you weave through these short stanzas, little couplets with the indentations. How do you decide how to structure a poem like that? Is there something in your mind that makes the poem feel that way? Like, I'll put Spectral Evidence on the screen again just so people see what I'm talking about at home. But there's this way that there's a lot of white space and indents and short lines. Is there a reason you decided to write many of the poems that way?
Yeah, it's interesting because a lot of times when I first write a poem, I usually write in, longhand. It's usually just like a paragraph, it's not in any particular form. I just get it down. And then as I start working on it, I guess a lot of it's intuitive. So for Spectral Evidence, the whole idea of a specter and sort of that, the end spectral evidence, it's sort of like, well, there is no evidence, right? And it's short on fact. And so I just wanted the poem to be really spare. So sometimes the content will dictate what I do.
Yeah.
But I do like white space. I feel like that works also as, I don't know, like it just creates space around the words so that you can really digest them.
Yeah, there's a feeling like it compresses them like into diamond instead of like flowing across the page. You know, there's a very tight feel to the poems. You mentioned a corporate job, and I don't know if you want to say what that was in, but I'm curious and wondering if that has any impact on the way you go about writing poems.
I'm happy to talk about it. I worked for a for-profit corporation, but I worked in their nonprofit division. So I managed fundraising programs for nonprofits. And we mostly did that through direct mail and email fundraising. So there was, you know, I wasn't a copywriter, but it involved copy and reviewing and editing and that kind of thing. But that was the work that I did.
Did that have any, was it helpful for marketing your books as they come out, having that kind of experience?
Yeah, it definitely is very helpful in terms of marketing because I've, you know, 28 years I worked in that industry and so I did a fair amount of marketing. Again, it's for nonprofits, but you kind of learn the ropes.
Yeah. So what can you teach people? Because, you know, we all sort of face this as poets. Like we love writing, we love language, we love reading books, and we want to make our own. Then we find a press finally, and then pretty much these days you're on your own as far as getting the books out in the world and making sure people actually read them. Have you found anything that works and that you could pass along as advice?
Well, I think even though, you know, social media has its ups and downs, especially since the pandemic, there's not a lot of other ways to reach people, right? And I do know from my press, they have said, you know, when their authors do an event, a reading online, or they do sell more books. So it helps. I think you need to have a presence, you know, a good website. And then if you have your own email list that you can, you know, talk to the people that are on your email list. And again, you know, not be super promotional, but just talking about poetry and what's happening. And I think another thing that's really important is to promote other poets and writers' work.
Yeah.
And yeah, we all need to support each other.
Yeah, for sure. And tell me about CavanKerry Press, because I wasn't familiar with them before, but we've had a lot of poets on lately that have been published through CavanKerry. How did you end up on that press, and why did you choose them, or they choose you? How did that work?
Well, they have a submission period every couple of years. I had seen I knew some other poets that were published with them. I'd seen the books, which they make really gorgeous books, really great quality paper, typesetting, everything. So I just submitted my manuscript to them in their reading period, and they selected it. And I, you know, had submitted other places as well. So that's really how I work with them. They're a nonprofit press. They just a lot of attention to detail. I like their philosophy, bringing lives to life. I recommend them highly.
Yeah, well, they're definitely putting out great books. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, and great to work with.
Yeah, oh, that's great to hear too. So how long did it take? How many times did you enter open reading periods and contests and things like that before this one found a home?
Well, her kind actually was only submitted to CavanKerry because they have a right of first refusal.
Okay.
Yeah. So the first book, you know, I submitted to a fair number of open readings, and, you know, it was in contests. It was a finalist and it was a semifinal, you know, and then CavanKerry took it. So
yeah. Well, let's hear another poem.
Okay, so this one is page 63. This one's called I Hecate. She was the Greek goddess of crossroads, and she ruled over night, magic, and places where three roads meet. And she's often depicted as having three heads, and usually they're animal heads. And there are like 4 poems in the book that are different goddesses This is I Hecate. Between queen, liminal sorceress, crossroads guardian, story of my life. Who are you today, my ex would taunt? More than just a Gemini, a trimorphous, human form in triplicate. Birth, love, death, maiden, mother, crone, moon, earth, underworld. I'll take triplicity over duplicity any day. 3 heads are better, even if one has to be a dog, a bitch. Dog, 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 serpent, horse, dog, cow, boar. Even if it means I am witch, that old crone at the cauldron, stirring willows, dark yew, blackthorn. It took a torch, a key, a dagger to cut away a past. It took 30 years. It took all 3 of me.
And that was I Hecate. One of the things that I love about the book is the turns that you make, the surprising kind of places you go in that condension that you do. And one of the things, one example of that is that dog, 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 serpent, horse, dog, cow, boar line, where that recitation, which is not something that you expect, and so it hits you in a strange way. How do you give yourself permission to take turns and surprise yourself like that? Is there, like, what is your writing process like, and how much is just letting things go and seeing what happens?
Yes, it's a combination of both. I think that for me, I like a turn. I really try to, focus on having a turn in every poem. I just think that's important. Mm-hmm. And the sound, like there's a lot of sounds, like in what you read, is a lot of that's intuitive for me. Mm-hmm. I just, like, my ear wants something, and it's not happy till it gets it, right? I may not know what that is, but I'll keep working at it till I get there.
Mm-hmm. And so that usually comes from reading a lot. Are there any, like, poets you especially like to read?
Yeah, I read a fair amount. I mean, when I was, younger, and influenced very much by, Sylvia Plath and Anne Sexton, James Wright, Robert Bly. I love Terrence Hayes, Jericho Brown, Diane Zeus. Currently reading Paul Tran's new book. So, and then I get, I have journals that I read. So I read a lot of poetry, and a lot online. So much is available online. It's great.
So what is there a common sort of thread or something that the poems that you love have in common? I mean, to read or to write yourself, is there something that makes something a good poem?
Well, I personally, I want to be moved when I read a poem. I just want something to deeply affect me. Mm-hmm. And whether that's joy or sadness, I just want to be moved. And I'm open to all kinds of styles too, however that is achieved, mm-hmm. And I feel like I'm still learning. So I'm really very greedy about, wanting to read more all the time. Mm-hmm. And yeah.
Have you done any classes or anything since, or retreats or anything like that since the MFA?
Well, yeah, I did Bread Loaf a few years ago, which was a good experience. And then I've done some poetry festivals, taking part, either, taught some workshops myself, but also participated. So usually every, year I'm doing something. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, let's hear another one. I think we have time for maybe 2 more. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Do you have one that you want to pick? Or do you want me to?
I have to go back and find it. Let's see. I was wondering about the woman climbs Statue of Liberty in protest, if you want to read that one.
Yeah, sure.
Sure.
All right, let me find what page that's on.
Oh, sorry, it's 41.
Okay. Yeah, this is one I did, wanted to include a couple of poems in the book that were more about contemporary women, because, I see the same kind of thing happening today in terms of women sort of being outside the norm. And is called Women Climb Statue of Liberty in Protest. Teresa Patricia Akumu, guilty of trespassing, 2018. She said, I climbed to protect our nation's zero tolerance immigration policy. She said, I climbed to abolish ICE. They said trespasser. They said disorderly conduct. When she sat on the skirts of Lady Liberty, we watched them climb after her. They said, get down. Our hero said, I'm not discouraged. She made her bed, and we watched and cheered and put a curse on those who wanted to arrest her for protesting putting children into cages. Oh yes, we witches watched her carry our truth up and over that ledge like a beautiful soothsayer, strong and lithe. Goodbye, dark ages. We climb with her. We climb with her.
Yeah, that was Woman Climb Statue of Liberty in Protest, which a lot of people might remember that from 2018. And it's an example of a different kind of poem in the book, which brings in contemporary women and stories. And the thing that I want to ask about was how you go about writing a poem that makes sense politically. Because we have the Poets Respond series. You heard Matt Honer's poem earlier today that engages in the current contemporary politics. But it's so hard to do. It's so hard to write about things in the moment that are happening right now. So how do you approach it without being like didactic and having a kind of preaching to the choir is the problem that comes up a lot.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Well, one thing that helps me is that poem's a sonnet. So again, it helped me to sort of condense the material, and it limits. You just can't go on espousing forever, right? So you're limited to 14 lines and the rhyme scheme. So that's what helped me sort of reel that one in.
Yeah. And then so we have prompts, and you gave us a prompt for later today. Yes. Do you write often that way, or what is your writing process like? Like, do you wait for inspiration, or do you say, I want to write today, I'm going to start diving into something, I'll prompt myself and I'll make a poem happen no matter what? How do you approach the blank page, which is often very intimidating, all that white space? What do you do when you encounter that?
I don't use prompts a lot. I haven't found that they're really successful for me. But yeah, I know that blank page. We often, with some of my friends, sometimes we'll do like the month of April, we're going to write a poem a day. Or every other month I do this thing called the cleanse, where for the first 7 days of the month, you write a poem. And yeah, you begin to just look. I think it makes you be very observant. And pay attention, which means when I go for my walk in the morning, I'm thinking about, I'm going to write a poem today, and just letting, just being observant of whatever there is. And I think what, I tend to do is say, just write a line, if you get anything down today. And I don't write every day, but it's during those periods where we're focused on it, it's get something down on paper. So usually I find that there is something, if either it's something I read or it's something happening in my life or some memory, it will trigger a poem. But they're not always good.
Yeah.
They're not always good.
And when you say trigger a poem, what is the trigger? Like, what happens that is a poem? Do you get a line to start with, or an idea that you want to pursue? Like, do you know where a poem's going to go before you start writing? Or what is the trigger? Like, what's the beginning of a poem for you?
I don't know where it's going to go. It could be like, for example, I took a hike with my daughter recently, this Oxbow Lake place we went, and I didn't know what an oxbow was. So I looked up what's an oxbow, ended up writing a poem about an oxbow and using it as a metaphor. But, when I started writing this poem, I had no idea where it was going to go, which I think is good. I don't think, in a way, I want to know, because I always learn something when I write a poem.
Yeah.
Or I should learn something, surprise myself.
Yeah, that whole no surprise for the writer, no surprise for the reader. I think that always applies really strongly.
Yeah.
So since this book came out, when did it come out? It was last year, I think.
It was about a year ago. Yeah, last October.
Yep. Yeah, timed maybe for Halloween. Like our show slightly is. When I saw you had
Yeah.
a poem, book based on witches, I was
Yeah.
like, well, this is a good time of year for that. Have you been, since doing all the research and making the book and forming your thoughts about it, have you gone back to Salem Village, and do you have a different way of looking at it now that you've done the research and written all these poems about it?
Yeah, I actually was so I moved to the Seattle area
Mhm.
a little over a year ago. I just was back in Salem,
Oh,
and
wow.
I was able to do a reading there with
Uh-huh.
with Jan O'Neill, who you recently had on,
Yeah.
and a bunch of other friends, and did a reading in Salem from the book, which was really exciting for me. So, I mean, I think I was still living there when I was writing the book. So, yeah, Salem will never be the same to me. As it was before I had this book, before I started writing these poems.
Yeah, yeah. But how so? Like, what's different?
Well, I mean, I like to remind people, I usually do a couple of posts every October, like there were never any witches in Salem.
Yeah.
This is the thing, there were no witches there. This is, I mean, it kind of makes me sad to see what goes on in Salem. And, it's fun, but then in my heart, I think these were people that were murdered, and you think of the horror that they went through and that their families went through. So it's tragic to me.
Yeah.
So now when I go there, I think about that.
Yeah, and it's like a Holocaust museum having a gift shop or something. I mean, those people died, and there was that much tragedy, and then we make it like a fun thing, which is it is fun, but it's not. It doesn't honor the people that went through that experience. One thing I was wondering too that I don't know is how did it end? How did the Salem witch trials end? Was there somebody who spoke up and said, "Hey, this is nonsense"? Like, if it's this social contagion that spreads throughout the entire population, more and more people get convinced of this belief that that the witches are real and all that stuff. How does that finally fizzle out? Like was there a clear reason why it ended when it did? Do you know?
I don't know the answer to that.
Mm-hmm.
I really don't. I mean, there was a point where they didn't allow spectral evidence anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But it really was just a few months.
Yeah.
It really, I think the first, I think June something, the first executions, they were done by September. So it really it wasn't a long period of time where those executions were taking place, but.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be interesting to see who, it must have been like a certain people or a number of people who came to the realization that this was not something that we should be doing, and not allowing that evidence. It might be interesting to explore that, because that's something I've never seen. I've watched several movies and read a few books, and I've never heard anybody really talk about like how it came to an end. It's all how it began, and then the height of how awful it was. But never, somebody must have stood up to the sort of the mob and said, no, this is not how we should be behaving, and look at what we're doing to ourselves, and it's only going to get worse and worse until we stop,
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not an expert on that at all.
Yeah.
No, thank God it stopped though, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, at some point it has to, because you run out of witches or people to accuse.
When you look in history, I mean, in Europe and other places, I mean, they were burning witches for. I mean, it's something that's happened throughout history.
Yeah, so. Yeah. Well, let's read one last poem. What do you want to close out with?
Oh gosh, that's a tough one. All right. I could close out with kind of a fun one. Yeah. This is on page 58. So this is a little triolet, and it's actually built from tweets related to Taylor Swift concert.
Who just dropped her new album, by the way.
Yes, I know.
Which my daughter just has on a loop right now. But
Taylor Swift makes Forbes' most powerful women list. A whole witch ritual. I love you, Taylor A. Swift. Shake off the haters. Here's to savvy, broomsticks, red lipstick. She's giving me major scarlet witch vibes, and I am here for it. A whole witch ritual. I love you, Taylor A. Swift. I wanted to hug her when she started pointing to herself, raised a fist. They're burning all the witches, even if you aren't one. Here's to witch grit. A whole witch ritual. I love you, Taylor A. Swift. Shake off the haters. Here's to savvy, broomsticks, red lipstick.
Yeah, and that was Taylor Swift makes Forbes' most powerful women list. And so since writing this book, one last question. Since writing this book, do you find yourself, I mean, obviously as you were writing it, you were drawn to times people use the phrase witch and call people witch in that casual way that we do sometimes. Are you still have a heightened awareness of witchery or the use of that epithet since you published the book? Is it something that's present in your conscious a lot more? And do you see it a lot more, you think, than you used to?
Well, I've kind of moved, yes, but it's sort of with a different context. So I've sort of moved on into exploring, often women of a certain age are called crones, witches. They're depicted in fairy tales as, hags, the evil stepmother. And so that use of witch is a little bit more what I've been focused on in some of the writing I've been doing recently. So.
Okay. Yeah. So that's what I was going to ask too, is what do you have up next?
I'm working on another manuscript, which is it's not really a project book like my other two. It's more personal, I would say. Mm-hmm. But again, it's exploring the idea of the difference between what society expects a woman to be and what she is, and in that difference creates monsters.
Interesting.
Monsters. So monsters like shame and guilt and things like that. So that's kind of what I'm working on now. Yeah,
that's very interesting. Do you have a working title?
A working title is called My Galaxy of Monsters.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, very cool. Well, we'll have to look forward to that. Thanks, Cindy, for being a guest today. It's been great talking to you and sharing this really wonderful book. Hope everybody picks up a copy. Especially this time of year, it's interesting, but it's a wonderful book of really, really condensed, strong, powerful imagery and some formal poetry too. So it's really a pleasure to read. I always love a book with a theme and something it's about that sticks in your memory. So thanks for writing it and sharing it with us today. It's been a pleasure having you as a guest, Cindy.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's been really fun.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, talk to you soon.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye. That was Cindy Veach, of course. Her book is Her Kind. You can find more of Cindy Veach's work at our website, which is conveniently and easy enough, cindyveach.com. That's Cindy with a C, CindyVeach.com. So check out her website. Now we're going to take a quick break, and I will be back with open lines. So if you would like to share a poem, I will deploy the Zoom link for anybody who would like to share. Only go there if you'd like to share a poem. Before you do, though, go here, email your poems to openmic, that's openmic at rattle.com. Email your poem there, and maybe we'll have time for 2 poems each this week. I don't think it's a very long. I think we have time. So if you'd like to share 2, that's fine too. But you can send poems about current events. You can send poems for last week's prompt. Last week's prompt was write a poem about a landmark in your area. So you feel free to share poems about that prompt, and we'll learn about where you live. Also, share poems about current events, anything you published recently you'd like to share, anything at all. It's open lines. I'll deploy the Zoom links in just a second and be right back with them. So sit tight, and if you just want to listen, stay right where you are. Okay, bye. And we're back. Thanks so much for your patience. Like I mentioned, the prompt for this week was to write a poem about a landmark in your area. And it's been a busy, very busy week for me here. So I haven't written a poem this week. I know exactly what I'm going to write about. So I will write about that next week and maybe share 2 poems next week. But let's go to some open micers. And let's go to Richard Westheimer first. Hey, Dick, how you doing?
Good. Caught me off guard. I thought you were going to read a poem, maybe read a Megan poem.
Well, it's a pretty quick. I don't know. We'll do poems later next week. I know exactly what I want to write about. There's a very fun landmark in our town, but I just didn't get a chance to do it. But what did you get to write about this week, Dick?
Let's see. I sent you one just open mic just a moment ago called "This is the Theory of Everything," which was actually a Poets Respond poem. And then I also had a PR poem, "The Kind of Silence Heard When Musicians Are Murdered." So if we can read 2.
Yeah, I think we have time to do. It's I didn't have poems, and it was Cindy's poems were short, so I think we have time for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll do "This is the Theory of Everything."
Okay, let me pull it up. This is the theory of everything, and do you want to explain what it's about?
So there's a sort of a new, now familiar, right, image of the pillars of creation from the Webb telescope. We're so used to these nearly, oh gosh, I don't know, pornographic almost. They
are amazing. They really are.
They're
even
amazing.
my daughter was talking about them too. Like she on a hike yesterday, she was going on about, and I realized that she was talking about those pictures. So they've penetrated like school already too, which is really cool to know.
And these were, more like we've had enough of them. Star nurseries, places. This is a nebula that's near the center of our own galaxy, about 6,000 light years away, and it's a star nursery where a lot of it's called pillars of creation, but it also has been dubbed the pillars of destruction because, star creation is a very, let's just say, it's an Ouroboros, cosmic Ouroboros with, stars eating each other and eating themselves and destroying the gas clouds that made them. And that's pretty crazy.
Yeah, definitely.
So this is the theory of everything. After Webb telescope's pillars of creation, near infrared camera image. 1, out my window, I see the cherry tree, leaves stirred by something unseen. If I were outside, I'd call it breeze. But here, behind glass, that's only one theory. Another? Maybe the matter between the stars hears me gasp when I peer at the night sky through the city lights, see the pillars of creation, the Webb image that appears as a field of dust, of death, of stars born of gravity, a diaphanous stellar nursery. Maybe it knows the fear some mortals have of shadows. There's a whisper in my ear that says, you are not alone. There is more here, more in the universe than you can know, not merely light, but creation, as invisible as breeze, as fleeting as autumn leaves, and yet so much like leaves. The way they're falling reveals the sky beyond the sky, concealed in that living green season, how we once believed these tumbling things were tree, and now they become mold and duff and soil and rot, and eventually, again, tree, like stars are ash, are dust, are galaxies, are dust, are ash, are me. 2, the pillars of creation, so much more and less than me.
Yeah, great poem, Dick. Thanks so much for sharing that. It makes me think, I mean, it could be a Hyben. I don't know if you've seen, do you remember Roberta Beery is the Hyben editor for modern poetry, and she writes Hyben that way with actual line break poems and then a haiku at the end. So that's pretty cool. Pretty
And
cool poem.
I was entrained by all of these theory and seen and me and appears, that sort of like rhythm of those kinds. But I'll take a look at Roberta's. I have her book because she was interviewed with you and loved it, and she's coming to Cincinnati next year.
Oh, is she? Oh, that's great. So she's back. She was in Ireland for a long time.
Well, she's in Ireland, but the National Haiku Association conference is going to be here in Cincinnati.
Oh, very cool. Are you going to go?
I think so. I've been involved with, the guy whose haiku you read last week. Oh gosh, I keep forgetting his name. He's part of our little haiku group now. So he's helping bring it here.
Yeah. Oh, very cool. Yeah. I love the haiku community. It's just one of the best in poetry, I would say. So I recommend going. They have fun time and love what they do.
Yeah, I think I will. And the other one is the kind of silence heard when musicians are murdered. And I'll just read the I don't know what you call this when a poem is for somebody, but it explains the conditions. For Yuri Karpatenko, murdered by Russian authorities for refusing to conduct a concert in occupied Kherson. What if the whole idea is wrong? What if music played at the point of a gun could resurrect the dead? What if there really are 10 dimensions of space and time? What if one of those dimensions were notes on a symphony score that one by one disappeared, but only when played perfectly? A cantata could become silence the more it is performed. The conductor's baton sweeping arcs, outlining the shape of empty space so that the music can rise into it like a swarm of bees, like a murmuration of note-shaped starlings. And what if the violinists bowed on infinite strings, thumbed light into the night sky, while at the same time the kettle drum's mallets strike the stretched skin of the one creature not named by Adam? And what if the conductor himself, bound at the wrists by a burning rope, is dragged off by the authorities for playing so perfectly that the disbelievers, the tyrants, the martial marchers all strut to the rhythm of their own oblivion? And what if the strutters can never know the kind of quiet that depends on autumn leaves falling? The quiet that breaks hearts, the quiet that is more dangerous than nothing, the silence that's heard by every one of us who sat quiet among friends, mourned the ones murdered for beauty, who we'd welcome to fill their bellies with fire, then sing courage hymns to the poets and painters, hope to the storytellers, even as one of their own lies on the floor at his home in a surprising pool of blood, red moonlight.
Yeah, that was the kind of silence heard when musicians are murdered. Great poem, as always, Dick. Thanks so much for sharing both of those. They're just good stuff.
And just a note on that one, it just sort of made me wonder, you hear about poets, in tyrannical regimes being the first ones who are rounded up. But it's probably not all the poets. It's the ones who are as courageous as this conductor.
Yeah.
And it's sort of what hearing about his made me wonder. We think about courage in writing a poem, the courage in the process of, being brave enough to let the unconscious come out. But what about the courage that it takes in this kind of environment? I don't know. I don't know how it translates. I would hope I'd be one of the ones for whom it translated.
Yeah, we definitely all do. And then who knows when put to the fire like that, as so many people throughout history have been, you learn your own about yourself in those situations.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much, Dick. It's always a pleasure. Glad you could join us. Yeah. Take care. Bye. There's Dick Westheimer with 2 poems, and let's go to Joe Nolan, who hasn't been on in a while. Hey, Joe.
Hi,
how you doing?
How are you?
Yeah, great to see you.
Nice to be here. So I've got 2 short ones for fall. These are both fall-oriented poems. The first one is Forever Leaves of Brown.
Yeah, go ahead. Is there anything you want to say about them, or just jump right in?
I'll just jump right in. They're just a poems for the season of fall.
Okay, great.
Forever leaves of brown. Trees may bear brown leaves throughout the winter. Some leaves never blow away. They cling from year to year as though affixed. Maybe they are worry mixed with fear, anger, and resentment, and cannot be let go, no matter how hard the wind may blow. Reserving aging places where otherwise fresh green buds would grow.
Very nice.
Next one is Indian Summer. Your place looked lovely in the summer when rain washed down the tree leaves near, when the heat was just insane, and no one ever wandered down the street in pouring rain. But I loved sweet September, Indian summer, warm and plain, when it seldom, if ever, rained, and grass went brown from the farmers' fields all the way into town.
Oh, very nice. Yeah, thanks so much for sharing both those, Joseph. And always, as always, love the way you read. It's almost half singing. I love hearing it. Thanks so much for sharing that.
Thanks, Dan. Bye-bye now.
Yep, take care. That was Joseph Nolan with Indian Summer and Forever Leaves of Brown. Let's go to Bev Wendell Atherstone next.
Hi.
Hey, Bev, how you doing?
Great. What a beautiful time of year this fall.
It really is. Yeah, it's definitely fall here now. The cold winds have come in. The leaves are blowing across the streets. It definitely Halloween. Halloween's right around the corner, and I like that feeling. The fall feeling when the summer's finally over. Don't have to worry about fires anymore either, which is nice.
We just had our first snowfall.
Oh, you did. Where is it that you are? I can't remember now.
Alberta.
Oh,
Alberta.
That's right. Yeah. So, well, welcome to winter, I guess, too.
Yes, finally. We were having days in the, I guess it would be the 70s Fahrenheit in the 20s Celsius, and it was just like summer, right up till Friday.
Yeah.
I'm going to read just one poem.
Okay.
And it was accepted. It was published by Spillwords yesterday. Oh, no, today. Sorry, today.
Congratulations. Yeah, that's great.
Thank you. And they had a contest called the 13 Days of Halloween. And they received so many poems that they decided not just to have the 13 Days of Halloween, but also another 13. So mine was in the second tier. So it was published today. And mine is called A Goblin's View.
Excellent.
We are the ghosts and goblins who around your brain still creep. We manifest in daylight as well as while you sleep. With eyeballs sorely bloodshot and fingers lank and sleek. We hover as you shudder and through the shadows peek. Your shrink says we aren't real, but how would they ever know when it takes imagination to see our viridescent glow? We hide among your feelings. In memories we burst full and bob along the ceiling, wafting pale as an old skull. Now you might want to query what makes us do this ill. Why must we frighten people? Why do we seek this thrill? Once we were fully bodied and lived upon this earth. Like other happy children, we giggled in our mirth. But our parents feared the evil of those trick-or-treating ways and forbade us wearing costumes of ghouls and ghosts always. So now we spend eternity scaring kindly human folk, 'cause we just pined for outfits like Batman with his cloak.
Oh, excellent. Thanks so much for sharing that, Bev. And that's actually going to be a perfect poem for next week, too, because we're gonna have a spooky poem Halloween episode. So so maybe we got some more
of
like
course,
that.
Monday.
Yeah. Next Monday's Halloween. We're gonna do it on Sunday though. I was gonna say it at the end, but that's gonna be the prompt next week is to write some kind of spooky Halloween type creepy poem, and then the show's actually be on Sunday. So we have a poet who has good creepy mythological story poems. We'll reveal that in a little bit, but that's gonna be the show for next week. So if you have any more like that, that'd be perfect. If not, a great preview of what we'll do on the open lines next week. Thanks, Bev.
And will it be the same time?
It's going to be the same time. Yep, Sunday, 8 p.m. Eastern. Yeah, just a day earlier so that you can do your trick-or-treating and all that stuff. Yeah.
Thank you.
Excellent. Yeah, take care, Bev. Always a pleasure to see you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah, there's Bev Wendell Atherstone. The title I have here is Goblins Scary Reasons. Let's go to Jayanthi Rangan next. Hey, Jayanthi, can you come and unmute? Let's see.
Unmute.
There you go. Yeah, perfect.
Okay.
Good to see you. Yeah, thanks so much for joining
Good to
again.
see you too. Good to be here.
Yeah, so what do you have for us today?
1 second. Let me just get that. Yeah, this is called the Alice in Wonderland Experience.
Excellent.
This is based on the landmark prompt. So I lived in a landmark Fort William in Kolkata, where the English had their base during their reign, with barracks built like colossal colosseums, straightened out for offices and residences, boundary drawn by gates and entrances, their safety measured in the girth of iron ingress of sturdiness that remain mostly closed, but with a mini built-in trapdoor open like modern blenders for add-ins, for movement of occupants, but otherwise they hid the bustle of the anthills well, moats running with muddy wrinkles, but without crocodiles, and the steep slopes where we as teens slid down for a dare. Tunnels which still had stray casings and bullet fragments, sunlight cutting the heart-hammering thuk-thuk, dark in there, with slant patches and a lone electric wire hanging for spook effect, I think. We, the army brats, grew up exploring barbed wires and various signs to keep out of danger, where roominess stood contrast to the space deprivation of civilians of the New Yorkish city, the drainage pipeways boasting of an interim so big no flood could fill, rife with the feel of an escape room that holds people captive and wants them to break through the locks at the same time. I brought in a schoolmate for a play date through Watergate. The military police checked in my identity and let us in, adding many firsts to my friend's experience, the vastness of open yesteryears, the decorations of cannonballs and guns, history's architecture of tall ceilings and skylights, cinema hall with noisy hum of film projectors, and a discipline all too visible. I took my classmate to the nameplate of Viceroy Lord Robert Clive and impressed her with military might, only for her to comment, "God, this has suffocation of a crummy jail."
Wow. Well, I don't know if I want the Alice in Wonderland experience after that, but wonderfully described. Thanks so much for sharing that, Jayanthi.
Thank you.
Yep. Take care.
You too.
Yeah, that was Janthi Rongan with the Alice in Wonderland experience. Let's go to a first-time caller now. Grace Bielecki is here.
Hi there.
Hey, Grace, thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having this. This is really great.
Yeah,
I
and
just
where
wanted.
are you calling from?
I'm calling from New York.
Excellent, yeah. So what do you have that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I just wanted to read a poem I wrote for Poets Respond. I really appreciate the fact that you organize that. I think it's a great way of incorporating news with poetry and some things that we might feel strongly with. So yeah, I'm just going to dive right in. It's a short little one.
Excellent. And do you want to explain what it's about first, or just let it go?
I'm just going to let it ride.
Okay, let's hear it.
All my heroes are dead or canceled. I'm just a white girl who's loved Kanye since I knew his name. Ye, Yeezy, Mr. West, Mr. Fresh, cruising to college dropout and dealing to get by before late registration, graduation, all the money promises we made together. Dear Kanye, I'm sorry you're bipolar and your mother passed from the plastic surgery you paid for. I'm sorry Kim called it and all the other big names are walking. I'm sorry even I need to take a break. I'll pray for you not to get shot or electroshocked, never explicitly asking God, but trying to believe in this world while I cry to your auto-tune crooning. Hello, my only one. Remember who you are. No, you're not perfect, but you're not your mistakes.
Excellent. Thanks so much for sharing that. All my heroes are dead or canceled. About Kanye West and what's going on with him now, which I don't know a whole lot about, but there's a lot in that poem. Yeah, thanks for sharing that with us. It's great.
Less about him specifically. It was inspired by him specifically, but it was a little bit more about the idea of just standing, offering people support in any way that we can, rather than turning our back and kind of like setting a hard no, which I feel like our society has an increasing tendency to do.
Yeah, it's a performative no too, which is the thing that bothers me. It's like, let me proclaim how awful this was so I'm not touched by it, which is just terrible. Especially, I used to be a group home counselor for mentally ill adults, and just seeing what people go through with mental illnesses, and Kanye clearly suffering from something. I don't know if it's bipolar disorder. Is it known? Is that his diagnosis, or is that just speculated?
Yeah, that's the most public diagnosis.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, other stuff as well.
Yeah,
but
sure. Yeah, but everybody's going through stuff and trying to make. Yeah. Yeah. Well, thanks so much for sharing that. Really appreciate it, and hope you can come on again.
Absolutely, I'd love to.
Okay. Bye. Yeah, that was second. That was a Grace Bielecki with All My Heroes Are Dead or Canceled. Thanks for sharing that, Grace. Next up, we are going to go to Mike Bales.
Good evening.
Hey, Mike. How you doing tonight?
Pretty good. You mentioned 2 poems. I ran and got my last book, and I can read a poem from that.
Yeah, go ahead. Please do.
I said 2 versions of the prompt poem.
Mm-hmm.
This would be from the most recent one, then I revised it a little bit even after that.
Gotcha. Okay.
So there'll be some, and I'm not doing the last stanza because I figure it's better without it. There's a bridge that went up. It's the nicest bridge I've driven across to cross the Mississippi.
Mm-hmm.
A new I-74 bridge, and the old one was problems. I have bad memories of the old bridge. Like a car dying on in the middle of the night. And
that's no good.
Like dying, and the flashers wouldn't even work. Or time. Ice slid off a trailer and smashed the rear window of my car. I was lucky I wasn't killed, that it didn't come through the front of the car.
Oh, wow. Wow.
I never heard of anything like that happening, but the new bridge is just wonderful. Free from traffic jams, 3 lanes going each way. And this is called Walking the Eastbound Span of the new I-74 bridge. The sun shines on the east span, and we walk across it the day before it opens, as traffic on the other span rushes to the west. 2 new graceful arches rise from ground and concrete beams. The Quad Cities' dreams. This glorious bridge holds promise for all. The governors of Iowa and Illinois and mayors of the cities proclaim progress that will change our lives. Now with 3 through lanes and 2 shoulders on either side, the new spans promise to avoid traffic jams of the past, while the aging green frame next to it is closed. A crowd of us walk, talk, and families pause to take selfies of each other, celebrating a new day. A pause can reveal visions of currents of the Mississippi, always in conversation with those who live at its shore. 2 inspiring arches angle toward each other to the keystone where they meet, and the sun shines through a clear, glorious sky.
Excellent. Yeah, thanks so much for sharing that, Mike. And so glad they got a better bridge there, because that sounded like that sounded like a death trap. That bridge.
They're awesome. I'll alter my routes so I could drive across them.
Excellent.
So,
yeah.
And the next one is from my book, Second Hope, that came out in June. It's 3 parts. One part is mixed genre, one part is a collection of short stories, and the third part's poems. This again goes back to my flagger days, when another flagger and I were working an assignment in Minnesota. Then we had to go to an assignment at Wisconsin Dells, and going through the assignment, we went through these construction zones in Rochester, where the Mayo Clinic is, and also where a cousin of mine's lived for a long time. So this poem's called A Call for Lesser Miracles. Rochester, the city of wonders, hospitals rise, specialists called for infinite cures as roads are torn, detours marked. New ways are found as another night pass. We are highway flaggers on the way to our assignments, lives to be held in our hands. Roads are mended, workers made of flesh and bone, cutting concrete, passages to be sutured and sewn, but the prairie is lost. The sun veiled in dust passes late afternoon without a whisper on our way to the interstate, paved in gold. Memories stir my cousin in town and his graceful wife. I can't call them now. Harvests gathered leave cornfields once gold bare, defining a time of passage. Stone crosses line a hill shadowing years as a grieving land must learn to grow again.
Excellent. Yeah, thanks so much for sharing that too, Mike. Always a pleasure talking to you and hearing your poems.
Oh, thanks. It's always a good time being here.
Yep, take care.
Okay, thanks.
Yep, bye, Mike. There's Mike Bales with 2 poems. Let's go to Sharon Ferrante next.
You?
Yeah, good evening, Sharon. How you doing tonight?
I love the interview with Cindy. I was very touched. Thank you so much for that.
It's a really wonderful book. I definitely recommend it if you have any interest in the witch trials and the topic of feminism in general too.
I want the book. Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah, great.
Yeah, I was very touched. I have a prompt poem.
Ah, excellent. Yeah.
We have lots of landmarks here. I mean, I have the.
Where is it that you are again?
In Daytona Beach, Florida.
Ah, that's right. Okay. Yeah.
I mean, just 10 minutes from us is the Daytona International Speedway. We have the beach, of course, at 15 minutes away. But to the east, about an hour, we have the Kennedy Space Center.
Yeah.
And right from our porch, we can watch the rocket launches.
Oh, I'm so jealous. I would love to do that. Yeah.
It is so cool. We check and see what time they're coming on, so we know we're gonna get to see it, and I got a lot of cool photos and stuff.
Well, if I'm ever in South Florida, I'll stop by for a launch. Yeah.
It is so cool. But a couple of months ago, I wrote a few poems about it. So this is not a poem I just wrote right now. I wrote a few a couple of months ago about it. And I decided, you know me, I'm going to read the silly one.
Sounds good.
It's spacey. How about that? It's spacey.
A spacey poem. Perfect.
We're going to space. Yeah. I know when it's time to add myself to some constellation, have some cosmic fun. I stop at Draco, pet a dragon, then knock on an elven door, walk on starlight. Meet a king on Orion's belt, have lunch, on the red planet, hot enough to cook green eggs and ham. Enough frivolity for now. I must head back to my other world, but I never shake out all the stars from my clothes.
Oh, that's great as always. Thanks so much for sharing that, Sharon. I love your
Thank you.
yeah, I love your short style. Yeah,
Thank you so much. It was fun. Thank you.
yeah.
Thank you.
All right, take care. Talk to you soon. That was Sharon Ferrante with "I Know When It's Time." Next up, let's go to Carla Schwartz. Hey, Carla, how you doing?
I'm good. And what a great night of poetry, as always. And I sent you two poems.
Uh-huh.
One of them is shorter than the other. That's the second one. I'm going to read the first one that I sent you first, which is Turntable Park. This is a poem that appears in my new book, which is called Signs of Marriage. And Turntable Park is a park in San Bortonville, New Hampshire, not far from Lake Winnipesaukee. And it's called that because at the end of in this park, there's a turntable, which is like where the trains get to be turned around. But it's a bike path that goes there. And that's what this poem is about, traveling to the bike path. And there's a bunch of other landmarks along the way since I have to get there.
Yeah, very cool.
Turntable Park. To return home, we go by kayak. The lake this night, not calm, but stirred up. Before leaving the dock, I turn on the light at the head of my boat. For safety, I think, but underway it blinds me. Alone in my kayak, ahead of you, blinded in the white darkness, I'm afraid a wave might drive my boat into a rock. When you catch up, you switch off my light in a frenzied, blown-about moment when we both almost crash into the shore, but then we master the fetch and head south toward our cove. Almost home, we look up at the moon and agree how lovely it is on this lake. This day could have been like any other, except I said bike path. So kayaks, so what the wind, the rain, the waves. So cars, so bikes, stone dust, and autumn leaves fringing the lakeside trail we must follow to its finish, Turntable Park. Because how could you stop short of a park named for the mechanism that turns trains around, a backtracking that anyone might hope for?
Oh, that was great. That really makes me want to go to Turntable Park. I'd love to go there and see that. Yeah, thanks for sharing.
Thank you. And then this next poem I sent to you is, I just took a picture of it because I couldn't get it soon enough. I self-published a book in 2004, I believe, or the second printing of it was 2004, and I illustrated all the poems in the book, and the poems were inspired by the Lorax by Dr. Seuss, and so they all have kind of a rhyming scheme. But this poem, the reason I'm reading it is also, I'm prompted to read it by the prompt, because this poem is actually a recipe, a directive, and it's called How to Photo Document Your Neighborhood. Before, if ever, you live in a place, when you move to the groove and give in a place, open your eyes and take in the taste of your surroundings. Notice what you distinguish with your naked face. Snap, pop, photograph tops of buildings, bridges, brick walls, defaced windows. Make yourself a baseline from which all that is new becomes familiar. In 5 years' time, repeat the exercise. Snap, pop, photograph anew, whatever fresh visions claim you.
Excellent. Thanks. Love the rhyme in there as always. Thanks so much for sharing that, Carla. And for those just watching, there's some icon graphics to go along with it. There's a cat and there's a camera here.
Cat on every page in this book, by the way.
Cat on every page. Okay, very cool. Well, thanks so much for sharing that, Carla. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yep.
Take care.
Have a good night.
Good night.
With Carla Schwartz with 2 poems. And now let's go to Brent Stauffer.
Hey, Jim.
Hey, Brent. How you doing tonight?
Real good. I somehow had a feeling you might pick me next
Uh-huh.
because I was the last one.
Because you're the last one. Exactly.
I tried to jump on early, but my earbuds said that they were dying.
Oh,
so
yeah.
I had to get off and just watch on YouTube while my earbuds recharged.
Yeah, gotcha. All right. Well, it's
So
great
now-
to see you. Great to have you. It's worth the wait for sure.
Well, we'll see.
It always is. So what do you got for us?
I really enjoyed the interview tonight. It's a compelling topic and compelling poems too.
Definitely is. Yeah, with a lot of relevance today in a lot of ways. Yeah.
Yeah, witch hunts everywhere, right?
Yeah, they're everywhere. Like no matter who, everyone's doing them. It's like the time.
And if they're not, they're claiming them.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. Yeah.
So this landmark is not from around here, but from where I grew up, which is in Birmingham, and it's a dive bar that is yet still qualifies as a landmark. Like it's somewhere that I would take people
Mm-hmm.
when they would come to visit Birmingham. I would say, well, if you want the entire Birmingham experience, you need to go to this place, which was it still exists, has been around for I think close to 40 years now, and one of the few places in Birmingham that supports local music.
Mm-hmm.
And so anyway, that's what it's about. It's called The Nick. When I think of you, you're filled with smoke and noise, such noise, glorious and awful music. Your black stacks of speakers would jumpstart the bones until we were all dancing and tossing our bodies around. Up the hill from the projects, down the street from the hospital, just a windowless box under the overpass until you let the freaks in to get their freak on. Sun Ra and his orchestra, Bella Fleck, Henry Rollins, Alex Chilton, Jane's Addiction, and almost every band I've ever been in. Birmingham's rough jewel shining through the muck. Even after Carrie bled to death in your parking lot, we loved you. But this poem isn't about that. I said this poem isn't about that. When I think of you, you're filled with smoke.
Oh, very touching poem. And talk about turns. We were talking about turns before, and that was surprising. Great stuff. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, I thought of that. It surprised me. All right, thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks,
well,
Tim.
it both made me want to go there at first, and then it was very moving. Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Brent.
You're welcome. Thank you, Tim.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's Brent
Yes,
Stofford
sir.
with the Nick. And let's see what we have for. That's the end for Zoom. So I shut down the Zoom. And we have a few more people who couldn't make it right now, but let's go with this. This is so Jerry Stephenson sent this poem, and he's not here at the moment, or maybe can't connect. I saw him on the chat, but we'll share this poem. This was his. I wonder if we should show it before or after. Let's read the poem first, then we'll show a picture. How about that? So here's Jerry Stephenson's poem. Let's see. Yeah. I'll send a picture. Okay, here we go. So this is Our Landmark Has a Watermark. And this is Jerry Stephenson's poem. Let's read it for you right now. There you go. Our landmark has a watermark. Entrance Island floats, or seems to, 2,737 feet north of Gabriola Island. Established in 1875, soaring 46 feet over the Salish Sea. Has numerous outbuildings, homes, to demise staffing from days past. It offers lighthouse keeping, in earnest, unlike a let. With a proper lighthouse keeper, weighty matter for this day and age. Hue and cry when government tried to dehumanize the personage like days forward try. Why our last crew, their FB wonders, keeping islanders informed, 4,200 souls, how could seas sail, postcards adored, to be sent afar, all to the sea lion's roar. Great ending there, all to the sea lion's roar. Thanks for sharing that, Jerry. That was Our Landmark Has a Watermark. And here is the picture that Jerry sent. So you can see this. This is the lighthouse that he was talking about. From a postcard, he says. So beautiful lighthouse there on an island. Thanks for sharing that, Jerry. That was good stuff, as it always is. And also very late at night tonight, is Potter O'Donoghue, of course. And what does he have for us? Yeah, so here we go. So he can't manage a time slot but wants to share these. The first is a landmark, while statue near where I used to live in England. The second is a now demolished building that I loved in a dystopian way, a terrible beauty, as it were. So here's the two poems by Potter O'Donoghue, and there's a photo with this one. And here, this is a great photo. So check that out. That is the photo he included, and then this is the poem. Well, look at me now. Don't turn your eyes away. They're so blue, so green. So you no longer love me. Well, that's okay. I don't either. I never did. What a fucked up surprise it is to still be alive. I wish I had been special, or halfway normal. I wish I'd been better, that the bubble mask had enough air holes to fully breathe freely. Sometimes I think that I'll never get all the thorns out from my skin until it's too late, and who, if not you, will look at me then? That is the first poem from Potter O'Donoghue. Great poem, Potter. I love that. And then here's the second photo. This looks like, let's see. We'll see what it is. It's a old industrial building with a big smokestack type thing. Let's see. Let's see what the poem's about. Sepulcher. Too big for that, though you hold my dread, thoughts and dreams, my loved. They nibble away at you now, like yellow rats, these hydraulic, beak-toothed modern-day dinosaurs hungry for change, even in this forsaken, starved place. You were sanctuary? Hardly. Cathedral? Definitely. A place I could worship, of decay, dissonance, dystopian reverence. Beauty, like hate, is in the heart of the beholder. Your nighttime silhouette haunted me daily with impecunious desire. I have to look that word up later. I wish I had gone first, though. I wish I didn't have to witness your literal downfall, to bear witness to that almost bestial screech you gave as another steel girder gave way. There is something, too, of the Scooby-Doo about you, a childish, nightmarish rhyme, an edifice, an artificial blast from the past I never had. Spooky, baby. You were spooky, and I loved you. Another spooky poem. Great. Thanks for sharing that, Potter. A good poem for next week, too, with that spooky ending. And this is a demolished building that he loved nearby, which we got from the poem. So thanks so much for sharing that, Potter. And let's see. We have Ted Guevara here. Aiken County is known for horse breeding, polo, and other equestrian events. The poem is based on a walk with my grandniece 2 years ago when horse statues with different motifs, such as this, were all over Aiken. Oh, they did this in my hometown of Rochester, too, like 20 years ago, where everybody would paint horses. Artists would come through and paint horses. And here's the one that, horse sculptures. And here's the one that Ted shared with us. This, if you can see it, the beautifully painted horse in Aiken, Ohio. Or Aiken, Ohio? Is it Ohio, he said? Anyway, let's take a look at this poem. This is Ted Guevara, Short Cell. My little niece gasped when I told her there's a real horse in this play horse, or rather display horse. She believed me, and now I feel a little guilt, wanting to take my words back. At her age, it would just muddle her thinking. So I turned to the graphics and colors a real horse doesn't possess. And the palmetto tree is entertaining, the slice moon on the blue of the horse's neck. I said, well, happy skinny green banners are almost blinding it, with their flapping in the breeze. And on the tummy of this fine steed, a wide screen shows his pals prancing around the track. Who will win? Who will take that shield of the city on its loving hamstring? My niece's brown eyes popped up to me, glad I was that she was paying attention. But her eyes wouldn't budge from my chin. Ham? She yelled. Ham! Tito Ted. That's not a pig. A funny poem. I love that line, though. Where was that? That shield a city on its lovely hamstring. Yeah, beautiful, beautiful line there. Short Cell by Ted Bernal Guevara. Thanks for sharing that, Ted. And now, let's see, Clayton Clark. Yeah, so Clayton Clark just sent these. Let me pop the Zoom back up, I guess. And because Clayton might be here. Clayton, if you're on, pop on that Zoom. I'll see if you're here. Might as well. She sent this email like minutes ago. So let me see if Clayton's still there. And if not, let's see. If not, I'll just read it for her. It's connecting. Is Clayton here? Clayton, are you there? Yeah, there you go. You can unmute yourself. Hey, Clayton, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing great. So glad you could join us, and it worked out. We got you just in time. I was about to close up shop.
Yeah, I know. Sorry about that.
No problem at all.
She just popped in. So busy watching everybody else's stuff. It's so fun.
Excellent.
And
Yeah.
great show as always. You know, really, really inspiring.
Great. Well, I'm so glad you thought so. So what do you have to share with us?
So I got a couple here, and they're both from past prompts.
Mm-hmm.
The first one's from the circle prompt. I can't remember how to say what you call it.
Yeah, neither can I. It's a tough word to say for me for some reason. I'm not even sure why. It doesn't seem like it should be that hard, but there's an H in there that kind of throws me off, I guess.
Right, and I don't have it in front of me, so it's a circle prompt.
Uh-huh. Okay, that works too.
Okay, so lines crossed. A fish on the line, pulling, pulled from the lake, smooth as a perfect lie, lies gasping in air for return to its dream. The dream hooked in my father's hand before he sinks back into the hospital bed, hazel eyes dimmed but locked on a latch in the sky. The sky welcomes him, dressed as he is, to his new life, the life a fish on the line pulls him into.
Ah, excellent.
And then the second one was from that last sentence of a poet's in any journal.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that was another one I think I failed to do. So, yeah. Oh, well. I tried.
I had a fun time with that one.
Great. Yeah.
So it's Consolation from the Susitna. I think it's a river in Alaska.
Oh, interesting. By
Dallas Crow in the San Pedro River Review. So the last line was, thwit, thwit, thwit through the drizzly day and into the gray night. So the spousal argument begins to take shape. Thwat, 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 flaps itself into a ball. It grows, then rolls out the front door. Past my blue-robed neighbor, who hauls in his trash bin, shakes his head as though, oh no, not again. On and on the argument goes, down the street, up the on-ramp, onto the highway where it speeds out of control. The round row bounces, flops, and finally goes flat on the cold, hard shoulder of gravel we later spit onto our pillows. This after having crawled back into the bed of vows, weeds, and strawberries. One kiss and the dum-dum song of who's right, who's wrong, levitates the two of us, and we float together in the moonlit swirl of this dark evening that began with a candlelit dinner. We pinch wet thumb to finger and extinguish the night. Then he whispers, but you have to admit.
That is great. I love that ending. Thanks so much for sharing that.
Thank you.
Yeah, always a pleasure. Yeah.
Thank you.
Take care. That was Clayton Clark with 2 poems. Yeah, and so glad he could catch you too. Thanks, Clayton.
Thank you.
Okay. And let's see. So that will actually be the end of the Zoom. I think that might be the last open line, or the last poem we have. Let me take a quick peek, make sure I didn't miss anybody. Yeah. Yeah, so that's it. So let's see. So I want to do more, like I said, I want to do more little poem DJing. And I think it'd be more fun. I always intended and I kind of forgot. So let me click the random button and see what comes up. And okay, so this poem, I might blush reading this. Let's see. This is How to Write an Erotic Letter by Anthony Farrington, one of the most popular poems in Rattle history, I think. And this is one of the funny quirks of the way the world works now. But this was one of the most popular poems we've ever published because so many people Google how to write an erotic letter. So let's hear some advice on how to write an erotic letter, courtesy of Anthony Farrington. This was an issue. It's a pretty old issue, 29 from summer 2008. And this remains this day like one of the top 5 most popular poems. It's a great poem too. I don't mean it's just because it's like a search engine friendly, but here it is, How to Write an Erotic Letter by Anthony Farrington. Here we go. How to write an erotic letter. How to write an erotic letter. You must empty yourself first. Erase everything you've written. If you're naked, revise all your clothes back on. Anyway, they're all you have. What matters is the taking them off. Begin with a title concerning insatiable carnal urges. Attach a handwritten note that says, keep your hair down, and if you come here, I'll tell you something awful about someone perfect, scathing and lovely to hear. Remember, each time, each letter is an entire love affair. Say A is for almost. B is the emptiness that follows. The letter O is what the body believes. If she writes in a letter, sometimes our bodies are too much for us. Quote her. How she turns you on, turns her on. You can quote me on that. I am remembering the sweep of your hair, the light of your breasts, your beautiful eyes expanding. I am remembering the slickness inside you, how wet, how deliciously warm. I think of your uncontrollable breath. I think of your nipples kissing my chest. I think of your mouth on my neck and the sweet taste of your tongue in my mouth. Set aside nothing for later. Call this, I was kissing and sucking and wanting so badly to fuck you silly, and erase it, but enjoy it first. Feel free to write a pretend letter to her father. Quote from it. Dear her father, sir, we are sorry to inform you, sir, of the mysterious demise of your daughter. It seems she was somehow sorry to say this delicately fucked to death, obviously a scandalous affair. Ropes and long-necked bottles, and oh, we mustn't go on. A man was dead too, sir, exhaustion, it seems, or dementia. With sincere regrets, I am yours. If she uses the word fuck in her letters, you use the word fuck, but at the end of the letter only. This is not prudery, it is teasing, and she will appreciate it. I want my face in your hair, your perfume in my breath, my fingertips softly touching the sides of your ribs, your waist, your thighs, your breast, your face. What is important here in this letter, your hand must touch her in this letter, so she wants over and over what is not there. You are foolish enough to write, oh God, prematurely. You deserve what you don't get. As a cautionary measure, delete all references to God. Jesus, it feels so good, and holy shit. Consider keeping God, you were so slick, so goddamn delicious. But you've already used slick once, now 3 times. There is nothing wrong with, I want to hear your voice coming and coming, but admit it's one-shot phrase. Damp cotton will open caves in your mind. Promise her, I need you electric in my mouth. Write concerning the art of seduction, and leave it at that. Tease her, truth or dare. End before you've said everything. Realize everything you are, and this letter precedes you, which is the loneliness of writing. What you want is never now. That's the essence of desire. What she reads is always past. That's despair. Think about how, if she could, she would swallow the world, pillow and all, take it all inside, all of you, so it could come shattering out again. But don't fool yourself. This letter needs to be filled with sorrow. Write, sometimes I wish I could be in your body so I could feel what you feel. Sometimes I wish you could be in my body, your own name amazingly on the tip of your new tongue. The smell of you, I mean me, in your fresh mind, seeing your old body arch away from your new body, hearing, seeing, feeling what was once you hold her breath, hearing her coming apart all around you. And then your own foreign release beyond your whole body, the cracking. It feels so open, this desire, almost to weep, then weep in the space of a letter you once were. Yeah, that was a little blushy reading that poem. That was from Rattle number 29 from back in 2008. Anthony Farrington with one of the most popular poems. And I think it probably is good advice, right? And maybe the people who find it by Googling Maybe they do find good advice. Let's see. Another random poem, the second one to come up. We'll do this one too. This is Jose Hernando Chavez with Politics. And this is from Rattle number 15, summer 2001. So I'm not very familiar with this poem, but let's see what it is. Politics. What did I do to deserve a day full of clouds threatening to drown me under their oppressive gray beards? A day when even the traffic encroaches like a murder of crows, as you take shelter in a small cafe, unaware the coffee has conspired with a cup to overthrow gravity and take refuge in this embassy of your lap. A waitress tries to quell the flames of revolution with a wet towel, but crushes your nether region in a painful coup that will last for days, as you sit and think how you've always hated politics, but knew one day they'd find you. So that was Jose Hernando Chavez with Politics from Rattle number 15. So I think if you like that, let me know, because I want to share more poems. There's so many. We have almost 6,000 poems in the archives, and like I was looking at it, it's like 2,800 of them have audio included. So I want to share more of those too. So if you enjoyed that, let me know. If not, and having me read poems maybe is not what is the best thing to do either. Maybe I should just find audio poems instead. But anyway, that is going to be the show for today. Let's do the haiku or the saiku really quick. And the saiku for this week is right here. It's based on this article from the University of St. Andrews. And the article is right here. And if you can read it, let me see if I can shrink it down. Chimpanzees synchronize their steps just like humans. And so a new study by researchers at the University of St. Andrews and the Central European University in Vienna has revealed that chimpanzees share a human tendency to unintentionally synchronize their steps when walking alongside one another. Whilst it is already understood that chimpanzees can coordinate when working towards a goal, such as pulling a string to release food, much less is known about their propensity to coordinate spontaneously. And so what the researchers here did is just monitor chimpanzees in a natural type environment and how they walk, and watch them, just observe them synchronizing their steps in the same way humans do. And humans are such social creatures. We have these like mirror neurons that we want to copy other people around us and other things. That's how we acquire language and all sorts of other things, learn new skills so well. That's why we're such good learners. And part of that ends up being that we synchronize things, facial expressions and things like that. And so the discovery here is that chimpanzees do it too, which was fascinating. And now the prompt for the saiku for the week is right here. Oops, where we go. Leaves falling into synchronicity. Leaves falling into synchronicity. That is your saiku for this week, and that is the show for this week. The prompt for next week, which I forgot to write down, was to write a spooky poem or some kind of Halloween theme type poem, because next week, next Monday is Halloween. Like I said during the show, if you missed it, or during the open lines, we're going to have the show a day before, just like we did last year. Another Halloween show like we did last year. Last year's guest, who was last year's guest? Ernest Hilbert. It was Caligulin was the book we did. So if you want to look back at that show, it was a fun one. But the prompt is to write some kind of Halloween, some kind of spooky story, some kind of scary myth. Write a poem about that'll creep us out. See if you can make the goosebumps rise up on my arm. That'd be a lot of fun. I'll try to write a creepy poem too, although I don't know if I did a good job last year. I'll try to do a better job this year. And I'll also write my landmark poem. But that is going to be next week's show. And next week's guest is going to be, right here, next week's guest is going to be Jean Hall Gailey. Jean Hall Gailey has a whole bunch of books that relate to Halloween. Becoming a Villainess was her first book. A more recent one, and a similar theme, is Unexplained Fevers. She writes a lot in persona from characters from mythological stories. So there's a lot of like creepy ghouls and ghosts in what she writes. And we're going to be sharing those. She also has a book. I can't remember the other book that I'm thinking of, but it's about like the post-apocalyptic Zombieland type thing. So she has a bunch of stuff that's really applies well to Halloween. That's going to be Rattlecast number 166 with Jean Hall Gailey. A special day, Sunday, October 30th, so it can be a day before Halloween, but the regular time, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Hope to see you then. We'll see you for Critique of the Week in the meantime, and I will talk to you later. Hope you have a good night. Good night.